So today we are going to be talking about all of the series that I have started this year that I should not have started this year because of all of the other series we're going to be talking about in this video, which are series that I started in previous years that I've made a little bit of progress on this year, but I still have not finished. I'm pretty sure this is the last in my mid-year checking kind of series that we run throughout July. The last video that you saw on my channel should have been all of these series that I have finished in some way this year, whether I have actually completed them. I'm currently up to date on the publishing schedule. Like, the series isn't complete, but there's no further installments being published this year. And also all of the series that I DNF'd, which I'm pretty sure is the majority of that video. But in this one, we are going to be talking about all of the ones that I have started and made progress on but have not finished or caught up. So these are either series that are still ongoing but there are more installments that I could read that I haven't, or series that have been published in their entirety and I just haven't finished them yet. We are not going to be talking about any series in this video that I have not made any progress on this year. So if there is a series that you know that I've started and it isn't present in this video, it's because I haven't read any installments from this series within the first 6 months of 2024. And an example of this would be like the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir. I've read Gideon the Ninth, but I read that like in October, so it's an ongoing series, but it's not relevant towards 2024 at all at this point. So we are going to be talking about 13 series in this video, which is one more than we spoke about in this video last year, which is not a good thing because I actively want to be finishing more series and telling you guys that I'm in the middle of less series. But sadly, as usual, it is not working out that way. I'm not going to be going in any particular order, but I am just going to be letting you guys know what the series is about, how much I've read this year, and kind of like how far in I am. So kicking it off, we will start with the only manga in this list, which is Dreamin Sun by Ichigo Takano. Now, I started this series quite a while ago now. It was a few years ago. I know that the volumes were difficult to get hold of for a while, which kind of really stalled my progress, but I started this one in 2020. So this one is a shoujo manga, which is essentially like a YA contemporary about this girl who runs away from home because she's feeling pushed out after her father has had a new baby with his new wife, and so she ends up living in this home with a group of guys. One of them is the landlord and the other two are teenagers like herself, and she has a crush on one of them. So it's kind of like almost like a little rom-com. It's kind of funny. It does have like a few red flag and like problematic elements, and something that I didn't like about the 5th installment, which is the only one that I've read this year, is that it's kind of romanticizing an age gap romance that really gives me the ick, considering that our main character is like a teenager in high school. I do generally really like this series though, because I think that it's really cute and it's really funny, and while I don't read a lot of contemporary stories generally, when I do, I tend to really enjoy manga and comics in that genre. This year I also read the second book in the Hades and Persephone series by Scarlett St. Clair. I read this one a couple of years ago and I really enjoyed it, but I just didn't continue for whatever reason. I think it's because I was a little bit confused about the reading order and I didn't want to start a new series to continue with this one, because if you guys don't know, the books alternate in this series between Persephone and Hades' perspective, and I think originally they were marketed as 2 separate series, whereas now it's all just like the Hades and Persephone series. So the reason why I picked up book 2, I have had it a while, but I picked it up recently because I was invited to a blog lunch with Scarlett St. Clair, which is the first event of that kind that I've ever been to, and I had an amazing time. This one is obviously a Hades and Persephone retelling. It is set in, it's almost like an alternate history, I think, where the gods came down to earth, so they live amongst humans, but things are a little bit different because all of the gods that are worshipped are the Greek gods instead of, you know, like Christianity and things like that. And like the city, the main city that this series is set in, is called New Athens. We are following Persephone, who has come to study. She's taken on an internship as a journalist when her roommate gets an invite to Hades' invite-only club. So she goes along, she starts to play poker. This dark, handsome, attractive guy invites her to a poker game, tells her that he'll teach her how to play. But what he doesn't tell her is that if she loses, she will be indebted to him, because this guy is of course Hades, even though she doesn't know it. And he challenges her to make life in the underworld world, but Persephone's powers are not working as they should, and everything she touches shrivels and dies. So in 2024 so far, I have only read book 2, but I'm hoping to read at least 1, maybe 2 more installments in this series this year. I also read book 2 in the Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark. This one is a series of contemporary mafia romances following different members of these two families. One is Irish mafia, which is the Griffin family, and then the Gallo family are the Italian mafia. This is set in Chicago, and all of the different mafias. There's also like definitely the Polish mafia in here, but they're all obviously fighting over territory in Chicago. So the Gallos and the Griffins especially have been fighting each other for generations, and so when one of the members of the Gallo family steals something from the eldest son of the Griffin family when she crashes a party, instead of naming like a blood price for this transgression, they force the two to be married, and then every book in this series is following a different member of one of those families and their own kind of romance. So I read book 1 last year or the year before, and book 2 I read this year. This is like pretty much a series of standalone, so I'm in no rush to continue at any kind of pace, but I really like that Sophie Lark's books are really compelling. They're super addictive reads, and I actually don't love the romances that much. Like, I'm not ride or die for any of these pairings, but I really like the way that Sophie Lark writes them, and that's what's keeping me hooked in this series. I recently read book 4 in the Flated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy, and I am hoping to read book 5 really soon as well. This one is a dark fantasy romance retelling of the King Midas myth, where we're following a girl called Auron who has been gold touched by King Midas, and she lives in a cage in his palace. Now, she actually wants to live in a cage because she's terrified of the outside world based on experiences that she's had in her past. So she actually really covets this position that she's in with King Midas, and on top of that, she is in love with him. Now, all of the leaders of this world are people who possess magic, and they're all responsible for an individual territory. So Midas decides one day that he would like to try his luck at conquering another territory and kind of joining it to his. So he starts to move into that territory, and he moves all of his favorite things, his prized possessions, with him, which of course does include Auron. And along the way, she is kidnapped by raiders, which kind of forces her outside of her comfort zone, outside of this bubble, and to come into her own and like stand on her own 2 feet for the first time in like a really long time. I really love this series and the spin that it puts on King Midas, and also the way that it makes you, because when you go into this you expect it to be one thing that it actually isn't, and I love how you question that throughout the beginning of this book until you kind of get some of those reveals. I also generally just really enjoy this series and the romance, and book 4 left on a massive cliffhanger, so I need to get to book 5 soon to see what happens. I am still reading the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, and I also am not going to be not reading the Wheel of Time series for quite some time. Like, I think we have about another year left in the read along, like the book club that I'm currently a part of for this series. So the Wheel of Time series is a very well known, very well loved epic fantasy series that follows a classic struggle between the forces of light and dark. In this world, every age is a repeat of the last, and in every age we have a dragon reborn who is a pivotal figure in this battle between good and evil. So in this series in particular, we are following this age's dragon reborn as he tries to change the tide towards good for good. He's essentially trying to stop the dark side from winning, but in recent ages the dark has been like slowly creeping in, so the light side aren't doing too hot right now. I am 9 books into this series. I think I actually don't know, is there 15 books in total? My spreadsheet is telling me that we have 14 books in total. So I still have a ways to go. I still have 5 books to go, but we're over the halfway point, which is great. I have mixed feelings about this series. I do enjoy the plot. I don't love the execution. I don't love the writing style, but it's really interesting reading this and like seeing how other authors have been inspired by it, which is one of my driving forces of continuing on with this series. This year I also continued on with the All Souls series by Deborah Harkness. So I read Shadow of Night, which is book 2. This one is a paranormal series that has a lot of historical elements in it, following a witch called Diana who calls a manuscript from the library at Oxford. She's working on a project and she's like obviously calling references, and she calls this book that is nothing to do with what she's working on. So she ends up sending it back, and then after that lots of witches, vampires and demons start to crowd around her because the manuscript that she called has actually been lost for centuries, and it contains important information about the creation of the magical creatures, and every group of creatures wants it for their own gain. So one of the people who turns up at this time is Matthew, who is an ancient and very powerful vampire, and he would like to access this manuscript because he believes that the vampires especially, but all of the creatures, are losing power. Like with every generation they're getting weaker, and so he's hoping that the manuscript holds the information on how they can stop this from happening. And along the way the two grow closer, and he vows to protect Diana from all of these people who are threatening her to gain access to this manuscript. So I really enjoyed book one, even though I didn't really expect to, because it has a lot of historical elements. But book two I wasn't a fan of. I thought that the pace was just way too slow, and some of the things that happened in it didn't make the most sense. But I know that quite a few people don't really love the second book in the series, so I'm still excited to continue on to book three, because one of the things that I do really love about this series actually is Deborah Harkness's writing style and the atmosphere she creates. So I actually don't mind too much that I didn't love book two, because I still enjoyed the reading experience, if that makes sense. I have very recently started the Themis Files by Sylvain Neuvel. I have only read book one so far. I'm listening to the audiobooks of these, but I do have book two queued up to listen to, hopefully in July, but maybe August. This one is an adult sci-fi series that is told in a series of transcripts. It is a full cast audio, which is why I definitely recommend going the audio route if you enjoy listening to audiobooks. And it is following a group of important like scientists, military personnel, engineers, researchers who are trying to assemble this giant robot and figure out where it has come from. I really did enjoy the listening experience with book one. I feel like these are great audiobooks. I don't listen to a ton of audio, but I do always have one on the go, mainly for dog walks. And this one, in terms of entertainment value, I feel like it's a real good, like easy one to listen to, because I personally prefer them to essentially not sound like an audiobook. I like them to be an audio performance, and this one definitely delivers. For Catch Up Book Club, we have now started the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, which is the final trilogy in the First Law world as a whole. I can't really give you the plot of this one because in my opinion it's more of a culmination of all of these tiny little plot threads that we've had throughout the entire First Law world as a whole that just kind of come to a head in this series, and this series would not be what it was if it wasn't for everything that came before it. But we are following a group of characters who are related to the characters from the first trilogy and some of the standalones, as they are on the brink of like social disruption to a scale that they've never really seen before, because we are in the industrial age. So we are at a point where we're about to have a workers' revolution, and all of the people on top, like our main characters, members of the nobility, members of the royalty, are soon going to be faced with a lot of angry common people that they're gonna have to deal with. And then in the background of this we have the wars between the kingdoms are kind of firing up again, and of course we have our big puppeteers, which are the immortals, hovering over everybody and kind of micromanaging from a distance. I've only read book one as of the first half of the year, but by the time this video goes live, the live show for book two will have already happened, and I hope I love it as much as I love book one. A series that I'm having a really good time with is the Pretty Little Liars series by Sarah Shepard. So I'm currently doing like a super unofficial, super low-key read along with my patrons, where we're reading a book in this series every month. It's like a YA thriller series. I'm sure you know what it's about, but I'll give you a brief overview. It's about this group of girls whose friend goes missing, and 2 years later they have to band together because they are receiving threatening text messages from somebody who signs the messages as A, which is the initial of their friend that went missing. So they group together again, even though they haven't really spoken very much in years, to try and find out who is blackmailing them and threatening to expose their secrets. I thought that I would hate this, and it's so compelling. I'm having such a good time with it, and it's also super nostalgic to me because at the time that that this was written, I was the same age as these characters are. So even though it's not great, like it's super problematic, the media that was aimed at teenage girls at the time that I was a teenage girl, like it was truly horrible. And all of that stuff is represented in here. So we have like fat shaming, slut shaming, girl hate, romanticized relationships with older men, including like teachers. But it's just such a good time, and it makes me feel so nostalgic for all of the stuff that I was consuming as a teenage girl that I'm really enjoying my read through of this. So at this point, halfway point of the year, I'm 4 books deep into this. I actually couldn't even tell you how many books this series has. I think it's like 13 maybe ish, but I'm having a good time, and as long as it's a good time, I'm going to continue. I have found a new comic series that I really love this year, which is the Die series by Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans. So this one is kind of D&D style story. It is following this group of teenagers that go to their friend's house. Their friend has like created a campaign for the birthday of like one of this group, and he hands out the die. Everybody picks their characters, and then they disappear. They are gone completely without a trace for 2 years, and then 5 of them come back. I think it's 5 of them. I think there's 6 in total. 5 of them come back, and 1 of them is still missing. To this day, they have never told anybody where the missing member is, where they went, what happened to them, and they've kind of all gone their separate ways up until one of them receives a dice in the mail, and he decides to get the band back together to figure out what this means. And once again, they are all sucked into the world of this game that they were about to start playing on this night. So I really loved the world building in volume 1, and I loved how I just felt like it executed everything so well. I love the way the characters that the players created had like a real impact and consequences on their everyday life when they kind of return to reality, and the way that this seemed just like so well thought out in the details of this world. I have also read volume 2, and I did really enjoy 2 as well. This is just a 4-volume series, so I am hoping to finish it by the end of the year, and I hope I enjoy the later volumes as much as I enjoyed the first 2. A book that I didn't expect to love but I did was the first book in the If Shakespeare Were an Auntie series by Nisha Sharma. This one is a series of romantic comedy, like rom-com standalones that are also retellings of Shakespearean plays. So this one is a retelling of The Taming of the Shrew, which is one of my faves. I also love 10 Things I Hate About You, which is also a retelling of The Taming of the Shrew. And this one is following a woman who wants to buy her family home because her father is selling it and retiring. Her mother's died, and it was like her mother's passion project. So she has kind of taken this up since her mother has died and really got invested in the house, and the thought of her father selling it breaks her heart. But even though he has a pot of money set aside for her and her sister when they choose to either get married or buy a house, he won't allow her to use this money to pay for a deposit on this house unless she is at least engaged to be married. So she is wondering whether she should enlist the help of her aunties to arrange a match for her when she goes on a date with Prem Verma. Prem is the host of a TV show called Dating Dr. Dill, where he talks about heart health. He also does not believe in true love. He thinks it's just like a hormone cocktail that makes you feel really good. Our main character Karina is such a hopeless romantic. So they end up going on a date, and the day after, Karina's sister is due to appear on the Dr. Dill show, but Karina doesn't know this. And when she goes to take her sister to this show, she hears Prem talk about how he doesn't believe in love, and she just flies off the handle, like calls him a fraud and a phony, and this gets broadcast to tons of people on Karina's sister's platform because she's live streaming the thing. And this causes the investors of Prem's community health center he's trying to build to pull out. So these two kind of flirt with the idea of fake dating, even though they can't stand each other and they have like differences that they can't compromise on, so that they can both get what they want in the end. I thought this was really funny, and I also really love the banter and the sexual tension between the characters, which is normally my favorite thing in romances. So I have picked up the sequel to this, which I think it might be a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing, and I'm very excited to continue at some point. So our penultimate series is a comic series. It's one that I'm very nearly up to date on, and there is actually a reason why I'm not up to date on this one, and it is Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith. So there are 6 volumes of this out so far. There is a 7th coming later this year, and I read volume 5 this year. So the only reason why I haven't read volume 6 is because I would like to try and get my hands on the Barnes & Noble edition if it's still available when I go to San Diego, which I think is where I am when you're watching this video, or at least when this video is going live. So this one is another Hades and Persephone retelling. The romance between Hades and Persephone in here is really kind of sweet, which I do enjoy, but this also doesn't necessarily shy away from some of the darker elements of Greek myth with some of the like portrayals of the side characters. And I really enjoy that this series kind of has been brought to date, modernized, has been made funny and relatable while still keeping some of that darker side and portraying that element. So I have been really loving this series, and I do typically stay on top of it. It's just because I want a specific edition of volume 6 that I'm not currently caught up on this one. And then the final series we have to talk about in this video is the only one that I do not own, and that is the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent. I would like to get my hands on physical copies of this series at some point, although I have only read book 1 so far, so I kind of want to see how at least book 2 goes. But this one is a fantasy romance series about a girl who is a slave, and she manages to buy herself out of slavery, but she has to leave her best friend behind. So she joins this order of magicians who she believes have the power to do real good in the world, and she has to train under this like grumpy fire wielder who's kind of removed himself from society to gain the power that she needs to go back and free her friend from slavery. And while she believes that this order of magic wielders are good and that they do good, throughout the course of the book she finds that maybe they're a little bit more corrupt than she anticipated, and maybe they're not too much better than the place that she's come from, although along the way she does grow closer to our mysterious fire wielder who I love. So I had a really good time with book 1. I really liked the relationship between the two main characters. I did also really love that we had a lot of themes of like trauma and healing within especially the first half of the first book, and forming what I would say is like the core foundation of the romantic relationship. It reminded me a lot of Bryce and Hunt in Crescent City, and I'm really excited to see where the rest of this series goes, because I've heard really good things about the sequels, and this one actually will definitely be done by the end of the year because it's currently my Patreon book club series. So that was the 13 series that I would like to, I'm probably not going to, but it would be lovely if I could finish or catch up on all of these series by the end of 2024. Down in my comments, let me know what is the #1 series that out of any of the series you're currently working on, what is the one that you would love to have finished the most by the end of the year? And if you guys would like to leave me a little something in the comments but you don't feel you have anything to say, you can leave me a red heart emoji for The War of Lost Hearts by Carissa Broadbent. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. If you enter my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Patreon if you'd like to join me on any of those. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.